ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that the calm that had briefly settled over Port Charles was never real, only a fragile illusion waiting to be shattered, and at the center of that illusion stood General Hospital, quietly preparing its next devastating revelation. What once appeared to be a story about loyalty and protection begins to twist into something far darker, as the truth surrounding Nathan no longer fits within the boundaries of simple moral compromise. The man everyone believed they understood discipline, conflicted, but ultimately driven by a sense of duty, slowly unravels into something far more calculated, far more disturbing. The possibility that Nathan is not who he claims to be no longer lingers as a distant theory, but begins to solidify into a chilling reality, one that threatens to rewrite every decision he has made and every bond he has formed. At first, his actions could be rationalized. His determination to shield Rocco from legal consequences seemed like the desperate act of someone trying to protect a child from a mistake that spiraled out of control. Yet, the deeper the layers are peeled back, the more unsettling the picture becomes. If Rocco truly is the one who shot Cullum, then Nathan's role is no longer that of a protector, but of an architect, carefully managing a narrative designed to suppress the truth. His calm demeanor, once reassuring, begins to feel rehearsed, as though every word and every reaction has been calculated in advance. The weight of that possibility shifts the entire emotional core of the story, transforming what once seemed like a personal moral dilemma into a conspiracy rooted in deception and manipulation. The tension escalates when the idea of Nathan as an imposter gains traction. Subtle inconsistencies, overlooked at first, start to align into a pattern that cannot be ignored. His knowledge, his timing, his almost unnatural ability to stay one step ahead of both the PCPD and those closest to him suggests something far more deliberate than coincidence. The realization does not come as a single explosive moment, but as a slow, suffocating understanding that builds with each passing scene. It is not just that Nathan has been lying, it is that the man they trusted may never have existed in the first place. And then comes the most devastating shift of all, the possibility that Peter is still alive. This revelation does not simply complicate the narrative, it detonates it. If Peter is the one behind the mask, then everything Nathan has done must be reinterpreted through a lens of long-term strategy and psychological control. Peter's return to Port Charles would not be driven by chaos alone, but by a precise, obsessive need to dismantle the fragile stability the town has fought to maintain. His history of manipulation, of orchestrating suffering from the shadows, aligns too perfectly with the emerging pattern to be dismissed. The idea that he has been operating under the guise of Nathan transforms every interaction into something sinister, every moment of apparent vulnerability into a calculated performance. What makes this shift so powerful is not just the shock of the twist, but the emotional devastation it leaves behind. Lulu, Dante, and everyone who placed their trust in Nathan are forced to confront a reality where their instincts have betrayed them. The man they confided in, defended, and relied upon may have been watching them all along, not as an ally, but as a strategist studying his pieces on a board. The betrayal cuts deeper because it is not rooted in a single act, but in an entire identity constructed to deceive. The question is no longer whether Nathan made the wrong choice, but whether Nathan ever truly existed at all. Rocco's involvement in the shooting of Cullum only intensifies the stakes. If the child is indeed responsible, then the entire situation becomes a tragic collision between innocence and manipulation. Was Rocco acting out of fear, confusion, or was he unknowingly influenced by forces beyond his understanding? If Peter has been orchestrating events from behind Nathan's face, then even Rocco's actions may not be entirely his own. This possibility adds a layer of psychological horror to the storyline, suggesting that the consequences unfolding in Port Charles are not accidental, but engineered. As the narrative moves forward, the sense of inevitability becomes overwhelming. Secrets cannot remain buried forever, especially when they are built on foundations this unstable. The moment Nathan, or rather Peter, removes the mask is not just a reveal, it is a reckoning. Every lie, every manipulation, every carefully constructed alibi collapses at once, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and irreversible damage. The emotional fallout is as significant as the plot itself, forcing each character to confront not only what has happened, but how easily they were deceived. Peter's potential return also signals a broader shift in the tone of the story. This is no longer just about isolated incidents or personal conflicts. It becomes a battle against an intelligence that thrives on chaos and control. His obsession with dismantling the lives of those around him introduces a new level of danger, one that cannot be resolved through simple confrontation. It requires exposure, strategy, and a willingness to face truths that are almost too painful to accept. In the end, what makes this storyline so compelling is the way it blurs the line between identity and deception. Nathan's transformation from protector to possible imposter forces the audience to question not just his motives, but the very nature of trust within Port Charles. If one man can wear a face so convincingly that even those closest to him cannot see through it, then no relationship is truly safe. And as the shadows surrounding Peter grow darker and more defined, one thing becomes painfully clear. The greatest threat was never the crimes themselves, but the illusion that they could be contained. The fragile order inside General Hospital is no longer simply cracking, it is collapsing under the weight of a deception so intricate that even the most seasoned minds in Port Charles struggle to comprehend its full scope. What once appeared to be a series of isolated misjudgments within the PCPD now reveals itself as something far more deliberate, a quiet invasion that has been unfolding from within. At the center of that unraveling stands Nathan, a figure who once embodied reliability, now transformed into the embodiment of doubt. The realization that the department may have been manipulated by someone they trusted without question introduces a level of psychological instability that spreads faster than any external threat ever could. The deeper the investigation goes, the more unsettling the pattern becomes. Files that should have led to arrests instead led to dead ends. Witnesses were overlooked at critical moments. Evidence was subtly redirected, not enough to raise suspicion at first, but enough to alter the trajectory of entire cases. These are not the mistakes of a flawed system. They are the fingerprints of control. Nathan's presence in the middle of all of it begins to feel less like coincidence and more like design, as though every misstep was guided by an invisible hand steering the PCPD toward failure. And what makes this realization even more devastating is the understanding that the department did not just fail, they were guided into failing. As suspicion intensifies, the narrative shifts from uncertainty to something far more chilling, the possibility that Nathan is not Nathan at all. The idea alone destabilizes every relationship connected to him, forcing those closest to him to confront the unbearable question of whether anything they experienced with him was real. Subtle inconsistencies, his tone, his reactions, the precision with which he navigated crises begin to take on new meaning. What once felt like competence now feels like calculation. What once felt like restraint now feels like concealment. The mask, if it exists, has been worn flawlessly, and that perfection is precisely what makes it so terrifying. Then comes the shift that changes everything. The shadow that has lingered at the edge of the story finally steps forward, bringing with it a name that carries its own legacy of manipulation and destruction. The possibility that Peter is alive does not just reopen old wounds, it tears them wide open, exposing a truth that reshapes every moment leading up to this point. If Peter is the one behind Nathan's identity, then the deception is not recent, not reactive, but deeply premeditated. It means that every decision, every alliance, every carefully placed word was part of a long-term strategy designed to infiltrate, destabilize, and ultimately dominate. Peter's return to Port Charles is not loud or chaotic. It is precise, controlled, and terrifyingly intentional. His obsession is no longer about proving superiority or exacting revenge in obvious ways. It has evolved into something more insidious. He does not want to destroy Port Charles from the outside. He wants to reshape it from within, to bend its institutions and its people until they no longer recognize themselves. The PCPD becomes his first and most significant target, not because it is weak, but because it represents order. By corrupting it from the inside, he proves that even the strongest structures can be turned against themselves. Caught in the middle of this psychological war is Maxie, whose connection to Peter places her in immediate and undeniable danger. Her past with him is not something that can be dismissed or rewritten, and as the signs of his return grow more undeniable, she feels the weight of that connection tightening around her. The fear she experiences is not rooted in uncertainty, but in recognition. She knows how he thinks, how he manipulates, how he waits for the perfect moment to strike. Every unexplained movement, every sudden shift in the people around her becomes a potential threat, a sign that she is once again being drawn into a game she never truly escaped. Her vulnerability becomes the catalyst that pulls Anna back into Port Charles, not as a distant observer, but as a force determined to confront what others cannot yet fully see. Anna's understanding of Peter runs deeper than anyone else's, shaped by experience, by regret, and by a relentless awareness of how dangerous he truly is. Her return signals a turning point, a moment where the quiet manipulation gives way to open confrontation. But even Anna, with all her experience, understands that this is not a battle that can be fought with conventional methods. Peter does not operate within predictable boundaries. He thrives on unpredictability, on turning expectations against those who hold them. The conflict that emerges is not just physical or strategic, it is deeply psychological. The PCPD, already compromised, struggles to regain control while questioning every assumption it once relied upon. Trust becomes a liability, communication becomes fragmented, and every attempt to move forward is shadowed by the fear that the next step has already been anticipated. Nathan's true identity, or lack thereof, becomes the focal point of this crisis, a symbol of how deeply the deception has penetrated. If he is indeed Peter, then the department is not just dealing with an enemy, they are dealing with an intelligence that has been living among them, learning from them, adapting to them. Amid this escalating chaos, a new and more terrifying possibility begins to take shape, that all of this is building towards something irreversible. The tension surrounding a potential death is not presented as a distant threat, but as an inevitable conclusion to a plan that has been unfolding in silence. In a story defined by control and manipulation, death becomes more than an outcome, it becomes a message. It is the ultimate assertion of power, a way to demonstrate that resistance is futile and that no one is beyond reach. The emotional weight of this looming possibility transforms every interaction. Conversations carry unspoken fear, decisions are made with hesitation, and even moments of calm feel temporary, as though they exist only to heighten the impact of what is to come. Maxie's fear, Anna's determination, and the PCPD's desperation converge into a single, suffocating tension that defines the atmosphere of Port Charles. Each character moves forward not with confidence, but with the uneasy awareness that they are already several steps behind. What makes this unfolding narrative so powerful is not just the shock of its twists, but the way it forces every character to confront their own perception of reality. If Nathan can be an illusion, if Peter can operate unseen for so long, then the very foundation of trust collapses. Relationships become uncertain, alliances become fragile, and the line between truth and deception becomes almost impossible to distinguish. The greatest danger is no longer the actions themselves, but the uncertainty surrounding them. As the story pushes toward its inevitable breaking point, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is not just a battle for control of Port Charles, but a battle for its identity. Peter's return does not simply threaten lives, it threatens the very idea of stability, of order, of trust. And as the shadows close in and the threat of death looms ever closer, the question is no longer whether the truth will be revealed, but whether anyone will still be standing when it finally is.